I don't think anything can prepare you for some of the things that were witnessed by ambulance staff.
Very rarely you ever got over to sleep because everything was just going round and round in your head.
We were an ordinary civilian ambulance service caught up in an extraordinary situation.
Now make your way to Omagh, there's been a bomb in Omagh, and I think it's pretty bad.
There wasn't a day that didn't go past. There was either a riot situation, somebody was shot or shot dead, or there was a bombing. There was an outrage almost every day.
Whenever you went up into work in the morning, you didn't know what was ahead of you. And at that time, the troubles were pretty prevalent. And each day was completely different.
I just thought it was an exciting job, thought I was going to put the world to right, and then it was the reality of actually doing the job, because you were there minutes after a bomb had gone off or someone had been shot, so it was actually quite a difficult job.
I've been based and still based in Armagh, in the middle of the city. And yes, we were in the thick of it. If the riots were going on and you know, barriers up and all that, you probably wouldn't have went home for 2 or 3 days. You know, you just stayed on duty.
First large ambulance for an accident call. First large ambulance for an accident call.
Once you got a call over your radio to tell you to attend to a certain location or a certain scene, you maybe got the basic part of what the incident was. You didn't know what to expect. You just did not know what was ahead of you.
The theory of dealing with it did go out the window, because if you arrive at a chaotic scene, sometimes as you stop, people open the back doors of an ambulance and fill it for you. The pressure was relentless.
You just were caught up in the heat of the whole thing and the adrenaline rush, and you'd done your bits and pieces. You got them to hospital, it was, you know, afterwards, it kind of hit you.
There was a tenseness that was almost tangible. You could actually reach out and touch it. You had that smell in your nostrils of the bomb had gone off, and the soot and the smoke and bodies. I mean, you got that terrible stench, and that stayed in your nostrils, and it stayed on your uniform for a couple of days.
In those days, especially at night, yes, you did feel apprehension, because there was a lot of activity and shootings and stuff like that there. You got to read situations, you know, you kind of got a sixth sense of whether it was safe or not safe to go in.
I don't think anything can prepare you for some of the things that were witnessed by ambulance staff. And the type of thing that we were going into, it's very difficult to train you for that. I don't think anyone would say that the training does help you totally with when you actually have dealt with something as severe as some of the incidents we had, and then trying to step back into the everyday life situation. It can be quite difficult.
I think one of the ones that I remember that caused me a lot of angst and stress was the Coshquin checkpoint bomb. There was this car was sitting in the middle of the road with its doors open, and we thought, I wonder, does this car belong to the bombers? So we just made up our minds we're just going to go for it, and we accelerated as much as we could, and was fingers crossed, eyes shut, and drove past the car. And this was a massive, massive explosion. We could see there were soldiers, obviously dead, buried underneath rubble. You could see their limbs. It was just a horrifying experience.
It was always in the back of your mind that you didn't know what was going to be out there when you went out, especially if it was a bomb. You just didn't know if there was a second device, and normally we were the first there. A lot of the times the security forces would have held back until we arrived, just to make sure that it was an incident and not an ambush for them. So yeah, it was apprehensive. I still, when I think back about it, I do get a bit emotional, you know, of the stuff that we dealt with.
When you got a call for a blue, which was a shooting, you didn't know whether it was a kneecapping or whether somebody had been murdered or whatever. You didn't really know till you got there. A lot of punishment shootings, and they use the term kneecap. I have never ever got anybody kneecapped. They were either shot in the thigh, or shot in the calf, or shot in the hands or the arms. I've never actually seen a kneecapping.
Numerous times we would have turned up at the location that we were given for the call, and says somebody requiring an ambulance here. There's a shooting. Just hold on a wee second. And he said, well, but we need to see this person. Just hold on. The next thing you heard a couple of shots. There he is now for you. And he went and treated the person and took them to the hospital.
We got a call to go to Ballagolly police station. It was dark, and when I drove in, I immediately got out. Right beside were a medic, an army medic who I reckon, and I knew he was trying to do something, which he was trying to intubate this gentleman. I was doing the compressions. I felt so sweating. I said, am I sweating already? But when I looked down, I was completely covered in blood. I looked down, it was just all holes, and every time I done a compression, of course, the blood just came out. And it sounds morbid a bit, but the creators were dead, you know, and there was nothing I could do for them anyway. You always think, did you do everything, and did you do enough? After every call, you always think, have I done enough? And of course, no matter how much you go through, there's nothing more you can do, that's it.
Over the tannoy came a call to go to the Rising Sun Bar in Greysteel. There had been a shooting. There was no more information than that. We pulled into the side of the bar, and quite literally the doors of the ambulance were opened, and we were pulled out, pushed inside the building, and the door slammed behind us. And then it's just when we looked in front of us, we just couldn't believe what we could see. But as I walked through the bar and I was counting the numbers of people injured, and I had a figure in my head, say 8, 9, 10, and when I got to the end of the bar, this guy just appeared from a side room, and he says, what about all the people in here? And I went in, there was lots of people had been shot, and some of them unfortunately were dead as well. All of a sudden, there was this noise of feet and people screaming and shouting. I'm talking about blood-curdling screams. And just for that split second, I thought, are the gunmen back again? Even though I had saw police officers outside when we had arrived, but it's just that split second, and it's just your brain playing tricks on you.
I was sitting watching the World Cup, as were the people in Loughin Island. It was obvious this was a very serious incident, and to describe the scene inside that bar would be just carnage. We actually stood the crews down that night to give them a bit of breathing space. Brought some extra staff in. We did a sort of a hot debrief to try and make sure that everybody was feeling okay. We offered that those people could go home from the shift that night. Going into the bar itself, it was a scene of bodies and quite a bit of what only could be described as carnage. I think it was about 3:30 in the morning when I came out of the ambulance station in Down Hospital. There was just a sea of lights, and it was the media who were waiting for an interview. So after doing all of that, having responded to the scene, having dealt with the incident and the debrief and the staff aftermath and whatever, there then was the TV interviews to do, which sometimes it's difficult to give a TV interview whenever you're absolutely exhausted. I personally would say that I would remember things like they're a rolling movie. Like it's very vivid. It's more than just a memory. It's like you can relive the incidents. There are certain sights, smells, or whatever that would trigger a memory or trigger a feeling, which it can be difficult to cope with. I think back then you didn't have time to process it, and that maybe is part of the problem, and maybe why you didn't get the chance to unwind from it before you were at something else.
When you're in it, it somehow seems to be different. You know, you're just thinking about the next call, providing help to the next person. That's really all that's going through your head. You just keep going, and every challenge was difficult. It's only when you get time to think about it then that you realise what you've just been through.
Even by Ulster's bloody standards, this was a particularly horrific and savage attack, a clear bid by loyalists to kill as many Catholics as possible.
We're on the Lower Armour Road of Belfast. I would pass this point many times, not only in my career, but since the incident happened. I wouldn't pass this particular point at any time without thinking of that incident. When I arrived, there was a large crowd of people, emotions were high. There was one ambulance on scene. Whenever I went into the building, I would describe it as a scene of carnage. As I was the first senior officer to arrive, my role is to be an incident officer. We actually got quite a lot of resource here quite quickly. We were on scene here probably an hour to an hour and a half and moved all of our casualties relatively quickly. The priority was to get the most critically injured people moved to hospital as soon as possible. After an incident like this, you can be both mentally and physically exhausted. This will be the first time I have stood for any length of time at this incident site. I've been past it many times, but I did get an opportunity to read the memorial, which is very poignant here. But even standing here, it can bring all those feelings flooding back, and they're not good memories, to be honest with you.
The Barrow Bar was a horrendous event. We had to get in touch with the military for the military to open the gates to allow us access to the Shankill Road. And when we arrived there, it was absolute carnage. People were putting dead bodies in the back of our ambulance, and we were having to take the dead bodies back out of the ambulance again to put live people in to get them to hospital. We were there digging, local community were there digging, police officers were there digging, the fire service, everybody was digging, looking for bodies. And the problem was, you didn't know how many people were in the bar. You didn't know how many people were still underneath the rubble. And it wasn't until maybe hours later that you realise, yes, we could account for everybody.
We're standing here now at the dropping well in Ballykelly, which is just outside Limavady here. And this building has been completely transformed from the night that I arrived here, that the explosion had taken place. En route, we were told it was an explosion, and when we arrived here, it was total pandemonium. There was masses of people. There was all the emergency services were on scene, and the military were here. The lighting levels weren't that great because at that time of the morning, just after midnight, there was no real lighting system. There was vehicles shining their headlights across into the building or into the destruction for people to try and see what was going on. But there was, on the initial information, they reckoned that there could have been 150 persons on site before the explosion. Mentally, you have to put it at the back of your mind when the situation's ongoing and do the best for the patients. Afterwards, you do dwell on it. I would say there was a few nights after that I didn't get much sleep because it just evolves round and round in your mind. Well, I've been past it numerous times, but when you stop actually and stand at the location where it took place, it is a bit horrendous. It just brings a lot of memories back to you, there's no doubt.
I was on duty on a Saturday and I was due to get home at 3 o'clock to board the train. I got this control ringing at a school. Now make your way to Oma, there's been a bomb in Oma, and I think it's pretty bad.
The massive bomb exploded shortly after 3 o'clock this afternoon as the centre of the town was packed with shoppers, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, teenagers and children.
Put the ambulance in through, and as I put the ambulance in through, I looked up the street, I could see people lying, but as I went across, this man said, look, there's nobody here injured. He said, these are all deceased. So we're not on a recovery here, we're not taking anybody.
Those that could had gotten away because the hospital isn't that far away from the main street. So a lot of the lesser wounded, if I could say that, had all gotten off site. But you know, this was on a scale that no ambulance service in the UK would ever have dealt with.
People thought they were fleeing the blast. In fact, they were running into it and to their death.
We didn't realise then, across the way, there was crews from Oma on the other side, and they were gathering up as many people as we were gathering up. And I thought, God, there's more people here deceased than we think, you know.
We had to put the bodies into bags so that they could be transported on to the temporary mortuary, and that was difficult. That was really, really, really stressful.
I'm at home and I had a bath. I remember sitting in the bath. I was sitting in the bath and I was just crying. I just couldn't stop crying. And the water was cold. I still couldn't get out of the bath.
During the height of the Troubles, where the bombs were being placed at police stations and stuff, we were tasked to Benboard Police Station. We were there just literally minutes after it had gone off. By the time the call came through and we got there, it probably went 10, 15 minutes, no more. We discovered that there had been a car which was actually passing, had been blown into the field, and there was a grandfather and granddaughter. Unfortunately, had been caught up in it. So yeah, recollecting all the things, it does bring back emotion. You put them to the back of your head, but I mean they're out of my head until you had them locked away, and then, you know, when you talk about them and bring them back up to the surface, pain's still there.
I don't think you can use the word cope. I don't think we did cope. As I say, it was the norm. You just did your job. We didn't think any different. You got a situation, for example, a bombing. When you arrived there, obviously it was a scene of carnage. We were digging with our bare hands, and we were lifting bodies and bits of bodies with our bare hands.
Today, a lot of staff would be stood down for counselling. We didn't have that in those days. You talked amongst yourselves, the people that were at the scene.
You just talked to them, and then when you talk to someone, you realise, well, there's nothing really he could have done. He relates to an incident that he had done similar, and they had the same scenario and the same scenario, and the same thing happened. That was it. It was, and it reassured you then. There's anything more you were trying to get reassurance that you'd done all you could. That was really what it was.
For me, I was always for just putting it in the back of my mind and locking it away. Of course, that's not the way they do things nowadays, but back in the 80s and early 90s, that's the way it was done.
But very rarely you ever got over to sleep, because everything was just going round and round in your head, just thinking on what you'd seen and what you'd done and the whole carnage of the whole situation.
The unsung heroes were the doctors and the nurses and the Royal and those surgeons who actually put the bodies back together again and had people up walking within months. For me, they were the real heroes. We certainly didn't think we were heroes. We just thought we were just doing our job. We were an ordinary civilian ambulance service caught up in extraordinary situation, and looking back on it now, I mean, you do wonder how we came through all that.
When you look back on it now, it's anything but normal, and the stress levels must have been crazy. But back then you didn't think about it. It was a big job satisfaction. You know, it was a big how would you say, lift. You know, that you knew you had done something to improve somebody's chance. I'm still there, some 40 odd years later. I'm still getting a kick out of it, but I might hang the hat up soon. But yeah, no, I'm still getting a kick out of it.
It wasn't always, thank God, it wasn't always gloom and doom. I think some of the people you brought in, and they're still walked about after it, you know, they're fantastic. And I still take great, I suppose, pride in the things that I'd done, I suppose, and in fact, well, you do your best for people.
It was a marvellous career, but you had some horrific moments, some horrific times, and some of the things that did make it good for you is if you did go to a location and maybe somebody had a medical condition or that, you treated them, they survived, you done your best for them.
The ambulance service was good to me in that I was well trained, I had an exciting time. I never ever got into the whys and wherefores of what had happened or how it happened. I just tried to deal with something that had happened in a very professional way, and I think I learned a lot, and I think on my retirement I'm certainly going to live life to the full.